take out this very well. It's okay. It's okay. Very well. Thank you very much.
皆さんおはようございます。これよりアントニオ・グテレス国連事務総長の記者会見を始めます。ご存知のように、グテレス事務総長は5日に来日され、6日には広島での平和記念式典に参列されました。本日は離日前のお忙しい中、お越しいただきましてありがとうございます。会見は英語と日本語の同時通訳で行います。グテレスさんにまず10分ほどお話しいただいた後、会場オンラインからの質問にお答えいただきます。司会は日本記者クラブ副理事長で共同通信の澤井利光が務めます。通訳はサイマルインターナショナルの西村義美さん、渡辺直子さんにご担当いただきます。では、グテレス事務総長、よろしくお願いいたします。
Thank you very much. Arigato. Good morning, distinguished members of the media. It is a great pleasure to be back in Japan, and I thank the government and the Japanese people for your very warm welcome. Saturday's peace ceremony in Hiroshima was an unforgettable and moving experience. The dedication of the people of Hiroshima and Nagasaki to the cause of peace, and the dignity, the resilience, and the courage of the Ibakusha are an example and a lesson for all of humanity. I intended to go to Hiroshima for the 75th anniversary of the horrendous explosion. Unfortunately, the COVID did not allow me. I had gone to Nagasaki 1 year before, and I have to tell you that when in the 80s I came to Hiroshima and Nagasaki as a citizen of the world, this has had a profound influence in my political career in my country and later in my action in international affairs. And I'd like to underline that in Hiroshima, I made two concrete asks. First, ask the nuclear-armed countries to commit to no first use of nuclear weapons, and ask nuclear-armed countries never to use or threaten non-nuclear-armed countries with the use of nuclear weapons with full transparency in relation to their arsenals. I hope these asks will be taken seriously because we are witnessing a radicalization in the geopolitical situation that makes the risk of a nuclear war again something we cannot completely forget. And I also want to express my deep condolences, remembering former Prime Minister Abe Shinzo, that I met several times and always found a true believer in multilateralism and a staunch partner of the United Nations. I was deeply shocked and saddened by his killing. Mr. Abe leaves a legacy of strengthened relations with the United Nations, and I would once again like to convey our condolences to the government, the people of Japan, and his family on his passing. Japan is a pillar of the multilateral system and the third largest financial contributor to the United Nations. But Japan's support goes far beyond funding. I commend Japan's solidarity and help in response to the war in Ukraine, its strong commitment to universal health coverage, its leadership in disaster risk reduction, and its contributions to United Nations peacekeeping. And Japan's global leadership extends to an increasing advocacy for peace, human security, and disarmament. At a time when geopolitical tensions are rising and the nuclear threat is back in focus, Japan's strong and consistent voice on peace is more important than ever. My talks with Prime Minister Kishida in Hiroshima confirmed this. We covered many aspects of the serious global challenges we face today, including the situation also on the Korean Peninsula. This mission I am undertaking is centered on nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation. It took place when the Non-Proliferation Treaty Review Conference is taking place in New York. I came to Hiroshima paying tribute to the victims, paying tribute to the Ibakusha, paying tribute to the people of Hiroshima. And I will be going to Mongolia and the Republic of Korea. Mongolia, that has been an important interlocutor of the UN in relation to the situation in the DPRK, and the Republic of Korea, considering that the denuclearization, full denuclearization, verifiable and irreversible of the Korean Peninsula remains a major objective, together with the success of the JCPOA, to avoid the proliferation of nuclear weapons. And as you know, I have repeatedly advocated for and welcomed the reopening and strengthening of communication channels to reduce tensions, and I hope the parties will resume dialogue and build on earlier agreements. And also would like to express my total solidarity with the issue of abductees, a historical injustice that is completely unacceptable in today's world. Recovery from COVID-19 pandemic is being hampered at the global and national levels by growing inequalities between developed and developing countries, between North and South, and by discrimination against women and minorities of all kinds. I count on Japan's efforts to reduce these unjust inequalities and to support inclusive, resilient, sustainable economies and societies based on the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals. I also urge Japan to support efforts at the global level to reform the financial architecture that is failing developing countries. We need solidarity to create a more just and equitable global financial system that works for everyone. And we need solidarity to combat the climate crisis. Japan itself is seeing the consequences of our exploitation of fossil fuels, with an unusual stretch of extreme heat earlier this year, followed by torrential rain. Addiction to fossil fuels is a one-way street to the destruction of jobs, businesses and economies, and to increased conflict, anger and disease. With its impressive records of innovation and deep appreciation for the natural world, Japan has enormous potential for global leadership on climate, and I hope Japan will take a number of specific actions. First, I encourage Japan to take credible and ambitious actions to cut emissions by half in the next 8 years, to become a leader in renewables technology and storage at home and abroad. And second, to build on your government's committee to stop funding coal plants. There is no such thing as clean coal. For real change, I hope Japanese public and private capital will stop financing coal completely, and I count on Japan and all G20 countries to deliver urgently on this promise and push for more. Likewise, G7 countries that Japan will preside next year must make good on their commitment to end new direct public support for international fossil fuel projects. Third, partnerships are essential for many coal-dependent economies to make a just transition to renewable energy. Japan can play an important role in these partnerships in support of the shift to renewables. In doing so, it will open new markets and accelerate economic competitiveness. Japan is today co-leader of the coalition to support Indonesia in accelerating its just transition from fossil fuels to renewables. And I count on Japan to demand that multilateral development banks immediately deliver investment and support for developing countries to expand renewables and build climate resilience through adaptation. As a major shareholder, Japan can use its influence to make these institutions fit for purpose in addressing the climate emergency. Countries have a choice: put innovation to work, carve out new export markets, and revigorate growth and competitiveness, or fall back on climate-wrecking, polluting fossil fuels, risk falling behind economically, and watch others reap the rewards of renewables. I count on Japan to make the right choice for Japan and for the world. I also look forward to hearing Japan's voice on pressing issues of global importance next year when Japan assumes the presidency of G7 and membership of the Security Council. I count on Japan to use its unique position as a bridge builder and peacemaker to strengthen global cooperation and build trust and solidarity. And I now will be very happy to take a few questions from the distinguished representatives of the media present in this room.
事務総長、ありがとうございました。それでは質問をお受けいたします。質問は英語か日本語でゆっくりお話しください。質問される方は、所属とお名前をおっしゃってから質問をお願いいたします。時間限られておりますので、お一人一問、簡潔にお願いしたいと思います。では、質問のある方、フロアにいらっしゃる方、挙手をしていただけますでしょうか。今、オンラインの方で、すみません、じゃあ、会場の方、先にどうぞ。はい。
ありがとうございます。毎日新聞の金子と申します。近年、ここ最近ですね、台湾海峡で緊張が高まっております。中国が軍事演習をするなどして、日本も懸念を示していますが、事務総長は、ここ数日のエスカレーションをどのようにご覧になっていらっしゃいますでしょうか。また国連としてどのような役割を果たそうとお考えでしょうか。お願いします。
Of course, I see things with concern. The United Nations abides by a resolution of the General Assembly with the so-called One China policy. But we all want that resolution to correspond to a peaceful environment in relation to this question. I think it's very important to appeal, first of all, to common sense. This is a sensitive question, needs to be treated with common sense, and then to restrain, allowing for de-escalation that I believe will be extremely important in the days and times to come.
はい、ありがとうございます。では次のご質問いらっしゃいますでしょうか。じゃあ会場の方どうぞ。
共同通信の松島です。国連は今回のウクライナ戦争で、まずマリウポリの人道回廊で市民を救出することに尽力されましたし、穀物輸出の再開についても力を尽くされました。ウクライナ戦争で次に国連ができるミッションは何でしょうか。
Well, naturally, the two things that you have mentioned were UN initiatives that I believe were extremely important to have the evacuation of civilians from Mariupol that had been impossible for months and allow, since the proposal I made to President Putin and President Zelensky for the opening of the exports of Ukraine grains from the Black Sea, and at the same time with the US and the European Union to work for the facilitation of the exports of Russia food and fertilizers to make sure that we are able to contain the dramatic rise that has undermined in a terrible way the living conditions of developing countries and of poor households worldwide. But of course, there are many other problems in which we are ready to intervene. We have a very strong humanitarian operation in Ukraine, and we are ready to mediate on any practical issue in which we will be able to help solve some of the problems, the pending problems that are created by the conflict. But of course, the most important objective is peace. Peace, naturally, respecting international law and the UN Charter, and the UN is always available to use our good offices in the promotion of a peaceful solution for the Ukraine conflict, as I said, with respect for the UN Charter and with respect to international law.
はい、ありがとうございました。他に質問のある方いらっしゃいますか。ではオンラインで質問来ておりますので、オンラインの質問を読み上げます。まず共同通信の土屋さんからの質問です。グテレス事務総長は広島の平和記念式典で核の先制不使用政策の採用を核保有5大国に要請しました。 これまで5大国や核の傘の下にある国の政府からリアクションはありましたでしょうかという質問です。
I don't think there was any reaction, and we are just 2 days ahead of the ceremony. But I believe this is the moment when the risk of a nuclear confrontation is back, something that we have forgotten for decades. This is the moment, as I said, to ask the nuclear-armed countries to commit to the principle of non-first use and to commit to not use and not threaten, as I mentioned, non-nuclear-armed countries with full transparency in relation to their arsenals. And I think that nobody can accept the idea that a new nuclear war could happen. This would be the destruction of the planet. And what is clear is if nobody uses for the first time, then there will be no nuclear war.
はい、ありがとうございました。それではオンラインの質問もう一つご紹介します。これは、所属が書いてありませんので分かりませんけれども、町田幸彦さん、からのご質問です。ウクライナのサボリージャ原発が軍事攻撃を受けています。国連の対応及び IAEA の具体的行動をどのように考えていらっしゃいますかというご質問です。
Well, we fully support the IAEA in all their efforts in relation to create the conditions of stabilization of the plant. Any attack to a nuclear plant is a suicidal thing, and I hope that those attacks will end. And at the same time, I hope that the IAEA will be able to have access to the plant and to exercise its mandate competencies.
はい、ありがとうございました。他にご質問はあるでしょうか。じゃあ会場の方どうぞ。
NHK の出川と申します。どうもありがとうございます。ウクライナの戦争について伺います。ウクライナからの穀物輸出の再開においては、トルコの仲介が非常に大きな役割を果たしました。トルコと国連が仲介をしたわけですが、この仲介努力を停戦実現に結びつけていくことはできるでしょうか。今、停戦を阻んでいる条件は何なんでしょうか。何が停戦を困難にしているのでしょうか。次に停戦を実現するために国連ができることは一体何でしょうか。以上です。
We have been working very closely with Turkey, and Turkey has launched a new initiative in relation to the possible start of peace negotiations. The difficult thing in relation to a ceasefire comes from a simple fact. The Ukraine cannot accept a situation in which its territory is taken by another country, and the Russian Federation doesn't seem ready to accept that the areas that Russian forces have taken will not be annexed by the Russian Federation or give way to new independent states. So these two positions at the present moment are not possible to conciliate, and that is why I'm very worried that we might have a prolonged war, and a war that is causing enormous suffering and having a very negative impact in the global economy and in the living conditions, especially of the most vulnerable people.
はい、ありがとうございます。他に質問のある方いらっしゃいますか。はい、じゃあ会場の方どうぞ。
はい、私、ジャーナリスト竹内と申します。今日はありがとうございます。私、国際関係ジャーナルというメディアで主に書いておりますが、 核についてお聞きします。日本は岸田さんが NPT にも出席しですね、多大な貢献していると思うんですが、核禁止条約、核兵器禁止条約については、枠の外にいるわけですね。ただ、これについてですね、私自身は日本が言っているような核保有国との仲立ちをするような、そういう貢献が本当にできるのか、非常に疑問に思っています。この核兵器禁止条約について、せめて日本はオブザーバー参加をするべきではないかと思いますが、このような論点、総理ともお話になったでしょうか。どのようにお考えになりますでしょうか。
We didn't discuss this point. We had a very short meeting, and obviously we respect the sovereignty of Japan in relation to Japan's choices. But I think it is fair to say that Japan has had a consistent commitment to disarmament and a consistent intervention in order to keep the disarmament and the non-proliferator agendas on top of the discussions in the international community. Of course, it's up for Japan as a sovereign country to decide whether or not to sign or ratify international treaties. But independently of that, I recognize the very strong commitment of Japan to nuclear disarmament.
はい、ありがとうございます。時間的にあと2問ほどかと思います。はい、じゃあ会場の方、どうぞ。
1990年頃の NHK の会長室の主幹です。私はですね、86年にマカーサーっていう1960年の当時の日本の大使アメリカの彼と一緒にですね、モスクワに行きまして INF 条約の締結に至ったことをやったんですが、これは日本のイニシアティブだったんで、アメリカの代表団が私を受け入れたんです。で、結局ですね、私の考えでは、80年代の終わりから2014年ぐらいまでが東西融和の時代だったと思います。でしかしですね、そのうちまた逆転していると。で、今のようなウクライナのような状況になってます。で、このままウクライナがどういうふうに終わるかということは大変ですけど、ただし、私は米ソがですね、中距離核爆弾を廃止した80年代、これを復活することは一つのテコになるんじゃないかと思っておりますので、それをですね、そうすれば北朝鮮とか中国なんかの問題にもそれをだんだんつなげていくことができるわけです。で、この辺について国連としてはどういうふうに考えておられるかということをお伺いしたいと思います。
We had, indeed, and I've been repeating it, we had very encouraging steps in the second half of last century in relation to disarmament. The agreements between the United States and the Soviet Union to reduce the number of nuclear heads, that was a very significant agreement, and in relation to the mechanisms of control that were established. The same in relation to intermediate range weapons. And there was this hope that we would progressively move disarmament agenda more and more and come to a moment in which the world could be free of nuclear weapons. Much before the Ukrainian war, this situation reversed. In the beginning of this century, we started to see a toughening of the relations between the biggest powers, and we started to reverse this trend. Some treaties were renovated for a short period, the New START, but we have now a serious negotiation that needs to take place for the next round. Others were not renovated, and we are moving backwards in relation to disarmament. We have now 13,000 nuclear bombs in the world, and we are seeing huge investments in modernizing nuclear arsenals. So this is the moment to say, stop it. That the billions that are being used in this arms race need to be used fighting climate change, fighting poverty, addressing the needs of the international community. So this is the moment in which the voice of all of us is necessary to say that disarmament needs to come back, and together with non-proliferation to guarantee not only that we will not go to a collective suicide, but that we are able to dramatically improve international relations.
はい、ありがとうございます。では最後の質問になるかと思います。その前にですね、ちょっとオンラインで、岡田稔さんからですね、ウクライナ戦争に対して国連はこれからどう臨みますかというご質問をいただいておりますが、これはもうすでに事務総長お答えになっていますので、この質問については、恐縮ですが割愛させていただきます。最後の質問になります。どなたかいらっしゃいますか。はい、どうぞ。
すみません、どなたもいらっしゃるので、もう一回聞かせていただきます。もし、ロシアが核兵器を使ったら、国連はどのようなことができますか。具体的にどうイメージされていますか。
Well, I believe that if nuclear weapons will be used, there is probably no UN able to respond anymore. We might all not be here anymore.
ありがとうございました。それでは、もう一問、時間的余裕があるということですので、いかがでしょうか。はい、どうぞ。
個人会員の佐伯と申します。核の問題じゃないんですけれど、北朝鮮の人権侵害ですね、これは北朝鮮の建国以来ずっと続いていて、2014年に国連が北朝鮮の人権状況報告書っていうのを出しました。でそこでその人道に対する罪ということがはっきり謳われています。しかし、これに対して国連が一体どんなことをしてですね、この人権侵害、人権弾圧を止められるのか、その具体策っていうのはどういうものがあるのか、その辺をお聞きしたいと思います。よろしくお願いします。
Well, in relation to human rights, the different UN human rights body had been very clear in expressing our clear condemnation about human rights violations in the DPRK. In relation to humanitarian aid, the UN was involved in humanitarian aid, especially food and medicine, to the DPRK, where the needs are dramatic. Unfortunately, no visas have been issued to UN staff. International staff has not been able to access the DPRK, and we are having enormous difficulties in having what is badly needed as humanitarian support to the people of the country. And my appeal is for the DPRK to facilitate the work of the United Nations and for donors to be able to support us, because as far as we know, the needs are now absolutely dramatic, both from the point of view of food insecurity and the point of view of health.
はい、ありがとうございました。それでは、時間が参りましたので、本日の記者会見はこれにて、終了いたします。グテレス事務総長、大変ありがとうございました。皆さん拍手で、お聞きください。ありがとうございます。
Thank you very much.
それでは恒例ですので、日本記者クラブからのプレゼントをですね、事務総長にお渡ししたいと思います。
Oh, that's very much welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much. All the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Arigato. Oh, yes.
Write something, a few words?
Yes, of course. Yes. It is not the first time.
No, I know.
Listen, this is better. Well. Yes. Today is 7? 8. Thank you very much.
Could you read it, if you don't mind?
Huh?
Could you read this, if you don't mind?
I pay tribute to the Japanese press, symbol of the permanent search for truth in a vibrant democracy.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Record.